If you're new to Next Practices Weekly, if you're new to I4CP, we are the Institute for Corporate Productivity. We're your human capital research firm. We discover the people practices that drive high performance. What we mean by that, organizations that excel in these pretty common business metrics: revenue growth, market share, profitability, and customer satisfaction. We do major studies, 4 to 6 of them throughout the year, on a broad range of HR, human capital topics. We do a lot of pulse surveys. We're also a member-based community. You see here a small sampling of the logos of some of our member companies. They range from very large organizations like General Mills, 3M, Visa, Microsoft, Amazon, and so on. As well as we've got a growing cohort of unicorn startups. We've got regional banks and healthcare operations. They really span across all market industries, all verticals, from healthcare and high tech, finance, manufacturing, retail, you name it. If you're with a I4CP member organization and on the call today, special welcome to you. Good to have you with us. If you're not with a member organization but would like to learn more about what that entails, the process for becoming a member, and all of the benefits, just reach out to anyone at I4CP. We'd be happy to get you that information. Or go over to i4cp.com, our website, where you can learn more there as well. My name's Tom Stone. I'm a senior research analyst here at I4CP, and I have the pleasure most weeks of co-hosting this Next Practices Weekly call series. This week, I'm joined by my colleague, Marshall Bergman, our Vice President of Advisory Services. Good morning, Marshall.
Hey, Tom. Thanks for having me today.
Good to have you with us. You'll be facilitating the conversation with our special guest here in just a few minutes, but a few other quick announcements and reminders for folks. This is Next Practices Weekly. As you see there on the right, we've got upcoming sessions with some great HR leaders from organizations like T. Rowe Price, Oshkosh Corporation, and Magna International. We also hold an in-person conference every year, usually in the month of March, always at the Fairmont Princess Resort in Scottsdale, Arizona. This year it'll be very early in March 3rd through the 6th. You see that registration is already open, has been for quite a while. We're getting a lot of folks, HR leaders, registering for the past several months. If you register by November 15th, so only in the next 3 weeks or so, you can save $300. You can learn more at i4cp.com, including, we've now at this point announced most of the speaker lineup. There's still a few that we're working on, but as you can see, we've got thought leaders and academics like Peter Capelli from the Wharton School. We have HR leaders from a broad range of organizations like Dow, Atlassian, Microsoft. We've got CEOs represented on the speaker circuit as well. So great to have all of these outstanding thought leaders. Also important to note, our conference is unlike any other in that we don't have vendors. There's no trade show, there's no expo hall, just your peers as HR leaders attending all sessions that are sort of keynote-like. We don't have a deep program with sessions that you have to choose between different time slots and so on. So again, i4cp.com/conference to learn more. Also wanted to note the topic we'll be talking about today is organizational culture. We've done many studies on culture over the years, dating back to our sort of flagship study, Culture Renovation, several since then, including one that we just closed a month or two ago. And there's a new brief and new report available called The Future Ready Culture. So you can scan the QR code on the screen or use the links that Zeta has helpfully put over in the chat to download the information about our latest study. You can also learn more about this study from a webinar we'll be doing in less than a month. We'll have our CEO, Kevin Oakes, as well as Marshall Bergman, who's with us today, our VP of Advisory Services. They'll be doing a webinar on November 19th from 1 to 2 Eastern, walking through some of the key findings from this Future Ready Culture study and report. And with that, I'm going to now turn things over to you, Marshall, and ask that you facilitate the conversation and introduce our special guest today.
Wonderful. Thanks, Tom. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. A really exciting guest, really exciting topic, and someone that I'm really excited to give an opportunity to tell her story. She's been on quite a journey with Access over the last couple of years, and that's Lisa Pariot. So welcome, Lisa. Excited to have you here.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. All right. So why don't we just get right into it? So you've been, sort of a very involved member with I4CP over the last few years. Access as a business has been involved as a member for a couple of years, I think since 2002. You were also a member of our CHRO Up Next cohort, which for those who don't know is a program for folks who are looking to make that next step in their career to either CHRO or CPO role, and it provides coaching, guidance, training, et cetera. And I think wasn't your final project around culture, Lisa? Isn't that what?
It was.
All right.
Well, it was the people strategy, and culture was a part of that. And we spent a lot of time talking about it because that was the one piece of our strategy that I was most nervous about.
All right.
Good.
Well, so so we're going to hear all about how that plan worked out and how she's been bringing it to life. But maybe before we get into the culture plan, before we get into the work we've been doing together, why don't you talk to us a little bit about Axis? Because while I've gotten to know it really well, and I love the business and I love the company that you all are, it's not a household name yet. So why don't you tell us a little bit about Axis?
I will. Thank you. It's funny. A lot of people will say, "Oh, I think I've heard of Axis," because they think Axe Capital from the show Billions. I'm like, no, 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 you probably haven't heard about it. It's kind of like a little thing. And then they're like, "Oh yeah, you're right." Or AXA. We are a specialty insurance company. And what that means is we insure risks that are very unique and not typical. So we don't write car insurance or homeowners insurance. We write things that are very complex and unique, like cargo or certain commercial property and agriculture, cyber, terrorism. So things that are not your standard issue insurance. And then we have a reinsurance arm too. So we want to insure some of our we are a primary insurer for these specialty risks, and we don't want all those risks. So we will get insurance on our insurance that we write, and we offer that to other companies too in layman's terms. So we're a global company. We're just shy of 2,000 employees worldwide. We're in about 8 or 9 countries, and we're headquartered in Bermuda. So if you looked on the initial slide, you saw a little picture of all of our different main locations, but it's unique that we are headquartered there. And we go there for board meetings. We're a public company, and it's a great place to visit. And we have offices in other major cities. So that's basically us, and we want to be the lead insurer for specialty insurance. And so we have a variety of different specialty lines that we're known for, and we're continuing to grow in areas that make sense for us. And this just gives you a picture of the sort of portfolio that we have. And I already described a bit, but this just gives you a sense of the types of categories of specialty insurance that we write.
Fantastic. So I remember we were working with one of your team members, Blythe, who's on the call here, and she shared a video that you all made internally about how you're all insurance nerds. I get the impression that you've got a lot of analytical, really smart, detail, number-oriented people in the organization.
You do. A lot of actuaries, right? They're the ones number crunching and figuring out, how we should price a risk, how we reserve for risks. So actuaries certainly very mathematically oriented, and then you have your underwriters that are out there. Is a very heavily relationship oriented business. They're meeting with brokers, talking to them about the uniqueness of what their clients need, and really trying to understand what clients need. And some clients want one-stop shopping. They want to be able to write a variety of risks with one carrier. So there's a lot that goes into it. It's a really unique business. And when you think about it in its simplest form, every single thing that we do in the world requires insurance.
Right.
Even though we don't write it all, but like car insurance, travel insurance, your homeowners, your health insurance, everything gets insured in some way.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting, and it like I said,
as I said, since we've been working together, I've learned a lot more about the business. I've learned a lot more about the difference between specialty and and regular insurance. And what I've just been amazed by is just the level of rigor and also like kind of the level of creativity and innovation that's required. You're talking about people coming to you and saying, "I have this unique situation, and I want to insure it." And you need to figure out what's the value of that, what's the risk involved. So this is collaborative work that requires lots of smart people with different perspectives as well. So we'll talk a little bit about how that's influenced kind of the culture work you've been doing in just a moment. But why don't we shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about you, because our audience here, as as I was describing earlier, everyone's working their way up to career path in HR, maybe have a goal to be a chief people officer, a chief human resources officer like yourself. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about your career, how you got to where you are, what were maybe some of the key transition points or key learnings that you had that are worth sharing with the rest of the audience?
Yeah. Well, just for starters, I never had an aspiration that I wanted to be a chief people officer. That wasn't my ultimate goal in the early days. I've been at Access for 9 years. Next month it'll be 9 years. And when I first joined at Access, I was the head of rewards, which is compensation, benefits, equity, and then I took on the talent function, so the talent development, performance management function. So that sort of rounded out the right side of my brain, I guess. And prior to that, I spent 17 years at Morgan Stanley. So I really grew up in that organization where I was in HR the whole time, mostly in a compensation related roles. They shifted throughout. And then I was an HR business partner as well for a number of years while I was there. So I got a broad experience base while I was there. And I wanted to be a bigger fish in a smaller pond. And that was sort of the allure of coming to Access to run rewards. And then as time went on, and I partnered heavily with my boss at the time, who was the CHRO. I was like, maybe I do want it. And I was lucky enough and fortunate enough to go through the Next Up program, which was fantastic. I highly recommend it to anybody on this call that has that aspiration. You certainly would want the support of your boss. But it really was a fantastic program. And I think I was also fortunate that in my role of head of rewards, I was at the center of a lot. So by virtue of being in a compensation role, you're exposed to a lot of confidential work. I mean, in HR, you are just, by default, inherently, but extra highly confidential things, whether it was who you're hiring, who you might be exiting, or things that had to go to the board, CEO comp, executive pay. And I had a lot of exposure to the board as well. And that was probably one of the most helpful experiences, I think, that helped me in my rising up to CPO. I had that board exposure. I had supporters and credibility with board members, and that's a big piece of the job too when you work for a public company, being able to present at the right level and talk about issues and bring them along and not give them too much detail. So I think that was an important skill and an important sort of ally that I had in my journey here at Access.
Super interesting you mentioned that about being on the compensation committee. I was literally running a session for CHROs out in Silicon Valley yesterday, and we were actually talking about making the next step. So once you're a CPO, how do you actually get to serve on a board? And one of the women I was interviewing, she mentioned that she'd always been on the business side of things and got a job in compensation and benefits. And she said it was like a job she didn't want. She wasn't excited about it. But for all the reasons you said, she got exposure to the board. She got exposure to handling confidential information, big strategic decisions about executive succession or leadership succession. That board, that experience in compensation really helped her prepare for the board. So then when the time came for, hey, we're going to spin off our company and you're going to be the chief human resources officer, they said, oh yeah, we know her, she's terrific, we can see her in that role. So that was your experience as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's one of the things that anybody who is aspiring to be a CHRO, that if you're working for a public company, you're going to need to have that skill. And that's something that I think people don't always appreciate or realize, and the executive comp nature as well, because the board is really tied into that. So ramping up from that standpoint and getting comfortable with that sort of content is important. And you can use mentors. You can use, a network that you have to help you upskill from that standpoint, and have a strong, if that's not your background, having a strong person on your team that is really well-versed in that, to help you learn. And also perhaps you bring them along to the meeting. So there's just different ways to tackle that.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's terrific. That was super helpful. So, all right, so let's get into the culture work now. So, I think, trying to remember back when we sort of had our first conversation, I joined I4CP, I think September last year, and it might have been right around now, like October or something. I think you were speaking with your member services rep, Justin Natali, who's now working on the project with us. And we were talking about your new CEO, Vince Tizzio, and the business transformation you were going through, and that you and he kind of understood that culture was going to be an important part of it, but you needed to kind of ease our way into that process. So let's take a step first. I always like to start with the business challenge. What was going on with your business back then? What's been going on now? And what's kind of been the business transformation plan so far?
Yeah, we so Vince, as you mentioned, took over as our company CEO about 18 months ago. So he was a few months into the job and he was making a tremendous amount of change. I mean, he took over and knew that there was an opportunity to transform how we work, what our operating model looks like, how we're, just doing business. We needed to create shareholder value. We hadn't for a little while. And he was like, we're going to turn this company around and we want this to be a great place that people want to work too. But we've got work to do. We've got some things we've got to really change. And I'm watching this, and he brought in a variety of new leaders, which was great. Skill sets that maybe we were lacking in some ways, or where we needed to really elevate. And as we thought about it, we're like, we're bringing in new leaders, which was necessary. We also have some great talent that exists at Access, and we need to make sure that we're harmonizing somehow. Like we have a really unique culture at Access, but how do we sort of capitalize on that and take the good things that we had from our existing culture, but refine it a bit? And that this term culture renovation, the book that Kevin wrote, was perfectly, it perfectly describes what we were trying to do. We want to keep, our house, but we need a new kitchen and a new bathroom and some new wallpaper. So how do we embark on that? And I actually saw Kevin speak at the Next Up, one of the Next Up sessions, and I saw him do this whole walkthrough of culture renovation. And I'm like, we need that. We need that for everything that's going on at this organization, because we're changing and we want people to come along with the change and feel inspired and understand why we're changing. And just because we've always done it and you're used to doing it a certain way doesn't mean that it's still fit for purpose, because the world around us is changing, and we need to sort of, modernize our capabilities. So it was a perfect opportunity. And I said, Vince, I think you need to talk to Kevin. He wrote this book. There's research that says if you've got a really strong culture, your business results will follow. So I think, it's an opportunity for you to really and us in the Exco to learn about culture and how do we, incorporate that in our renovation. He was like, let's do it. Let's do it. He got really excited about it. So he bought in from the first conversation. And it's been a journey since then, and we had to get the rest of the Exco and comfortable with this process too, because it is a process. But what I love is this quote that we have on the slide right here: everyday practices matter more than anything. How leaders and team members enact every day is really what creates your culture. Right. And so we realized that the values that we had, and we had our stated values, but they were kind of table stakes. That's how I always describe it. They weren't speaking to the shift that we were trying to make and the new Access and how we really needed to show up in a special way every day. And so we said, let's take this opportunity to build, to describe new values and what those behaviors actually are, to bring to life those values. And let's communicate that and tell the organization why. And so that was sort of our journey in a nutshell. And if I may, there's one quote that I'd like to read. I actually have three here, but I read this on our CEO town hall when we introduced culture. And I think it really resonated with people. And, for the ability for an organization to adapt to and even embrace change becomes a decisive characteristic separating high performance organizations from the pack. And that was sort of, how we framed it. Like, it's okay for us to change and shift. We're doing this because we want to keep up and we want to be flexible and agile too. And so I think I do think it really spoke to the organization when
that's great.
We articulated that.
Well, yeah, thanks for sharing. I saw in the question, people had a question about culture renovation book. So yeah, that's the book by Kevin Oakes. And if you remember, you have access to the underlying research that fed into that book, as well as a variety of other stuff. And we leveraged a lot of that research in our conversations with Vince. And I'll also say that, the benefit of Lisa saying, "Hey, Vince, you need to meet Kevin and Marshall and learn about cultural innovation." We got to go down to Bermuda to speak to their exco there. So special perks for working with a Bermuda-based company is you get to go down and meet with the board down in Bermuda. So that was nice. Nice.
Yep.
Now, I do remember, though, I think it was like around this time last year, we were going to get started with the project. And one of the challenges or some of the pushback that you were getting from the Exco was that they had so much on their plate, right? They had this big transformation agenda, changing the operating model, et cetera. And I know that, like you said, from the very beginning, Vince was bought in on this idea of culture, but not everyone knew how to prioritize it when they had so many things going on. How did we, I don't recall, how did we break through that and to get people to say, okay, this is, maybe if not equally as important, somewhat, an important part of our journey to get our stock price and create shareholder value.
Yep, you're exactly right. We had to take a couple of bites at the apple on sort of getting everybody comfortable and on board with this. Vince, like you said, bought in right away. We went to our exco and said, all right, we're going to do this big project. Here are the 18 steps. Here's what we're going to do. Here's why. And it was a tricky conversation, let's say that. And probably one of my first, before I even officially took over as chief people officer. And it was just prior to that. And they were like, what is she doing? What is this project? And we have, like you said, we have enough going on. This thing is going to be huge, opening this up to the whole organization. And oh, by the way, we've watched this movie before. We've done something with values, and you know what? It's posters that get stuck up on, on the wall in the lunchroom, and that's it. And then nothing ever happens. So we're going to do this whole big thing, and then that's what we're going to end up with. No thanks. Been there, done that. And Vince continued to be a supporter and said, let's take this feedback and think about it differently, but we need to do this in some way. So we went away, we talked to you and the team and said, how do we do this then? Because we felt so impassioned by it. And it was pretty brilliant. And I'm really proud of the work that was done in the partnership that we had with you and your team. But we said, let's instead have it not feel so gigantic and just take the exco through this. Let's come back and say, all right, how about if we just work with the exco team? Half of you are new and you haven't worked at Access for very long. And then we have some existing Access members, and we need to align because you all have different views or vision of what culture is and what you want it to be. So let's get on the same page for you guys. And then that should naturally transcend in the organization. And as we had you guys come down, and I think as you presented the research to the group and brought it to life and said, look, these are the things that influence culture. And here's the research. Here's what Microsoft did. Here's what other companies did. They were, I think, really illuminated by, wow, this is really impactful and this is a real opportunity for us. And so they were sold in that conversation. And then we had a little fun with it. And we did that workshop where we had them sort of give us your view of what's important. How do you want your people showing up? What do you think is going to drive Access, and make us successful? And so everybody had a chance to weigh in, and people who are not comfortable with the project have completely said, wow, this was done really well. And then once we got through that phase, there was a lot more comfort with, now let's open it up to the rest of the organization and get feedback. So we did sort of a reverse order of the 18 steps.
Yeah. So you just reminded me now, and I'm going back to think about the conversations we have with Justin, who's on the team as well. And for those who don't know, the first step of the 18 steps is to do a listening tour, basically understand the current state of your culture. And so we posed that, and the organization was busy. There were layoffs going on. There were things happening in the organization that sort of seemed intimidating. It seemed like too much. And so, we actually worked with you to reverse that. And we said, well, let's get the leadership team, the exco, on board first. And then what we've actually done, and we can talk a little bit about that as we talk about the next steps. But then we helped your leadership team define the purpose, the values and the behaviors that they want to see that's going to help bring the culture to life. Now we've gone out and we've tested those. We kind of reverse engineered the process a little bit. And it seems like it's worked out really well. And by the way, what was really interesting too, and I think it's nice for us to highlight this as well. Vince, as a CEO, kind of already understood that listening was going to be a really important part of it as well. So we did have some data. What was Vince doing? He was doing these Fridays with Vince or something like that. Why don't you talk a little bit about those? Those were a cool initiative.
I know. It always sounds like that book, Tuesdays with Maury. I think it was Conversations with Vince. I think that's what it is called. And he was doing that before we even started this culture work. But that was a great opportunity for him to connect in more intimate settings. There were groups of like, I don't know, 25-ish per session. He still does them. And I see Blythe on our screen right now. She hosts them with him. And it's really a great opportunity for Vince to hear directly from folks and relate to the work that they're doing. They're the ones in the trenches doing the work. And I'm gonna paraphrase Blythe, but she's like, I've been on these calls where I see their body language and they're like, all right, what's this guy gonna say? And by the end of the conversation, they're like enamored because they're like, he gets what we're doing. And it's a really important connection. And there's been suggestions that have come out of some of those conversations that we've acted upon. So it's a great conduit. And I would encourage, for any organization that is going through change or where you have an opportunity to have your CEO do some sort of sessions, it really is I think a change agent. It's a really important way of, I think, building a certain culture and creating that connectivity.
Yeah, and so we'd say in our research as well, you need to co-create, have a co-creation mindset. That's one of the findings, one of the 18 steps, and so that's helping that. At our conference this past year, we had Oscar Munoz, the former CEO of United Airlines. When he took over the company, he was trying to turn around the culture, and he talked about the most important thing he did was he did listening sessions. And I remember so well that one of the people in the audience said, so when you went out to do your listening, was there like a big setup? Did you have like your people set things up? And he said, no, I went out to where my people were and I talked to them. And there was sort of a gasp from all the HR people. You were going out and having unscripted conversation. What if they asked you to do something and you couldn't fix it? And he said, I didn't go out there saying I was going to fix everything. I went out there and said I was going to listen, and I tried to fix. And I think Vince had that same attitude too, right?
I think he did. And I was going to make that comment. It doesn't mean that everything that we hear we're going to do something about or there is an action step, but you start to just gather and hear from the troops and understand what the pulse is and what people are feeling and thinking. And maybe there are some things that get actioned and some things you're like, all right, let me just file that away. And we can't address every single thing.
Right. And I think, and what our research shows is just the act of going out there and listening and hearing from people means whatever does change, they feel like they've had a stamp on it. They feel like they've had some influence. That was really as well. I know you have some other programs as well. So why don't we talk a little bit about the work we've done so far? So we've mentioned a little bit about the 18 steps. I know we've got something we can show kind of the phases that you've been focusing on. So talk people through the process, highlight anything that you think was really important that you thought was really good, or anything that you wish you'd known about that you do differently next time for the audience. So why don't you talk us through it?
Yeah, so I guess this is our version of the 18 steps, but the 18 steps, in the book are sort of core to culture renovation, but this is what worked for us in just different order. So obviously we needed to, take a couple tries of getting the exco comfortable with moving forward with this project that we felt so strongly about. And then your team came in and said, let's do some research. We want to talk to each of your 10-ish exco members, hear from them. How do they define culture? What does it look like to them? And let's just see are we starting from a similar platform across the group? Where are we? So you did basically a data gathering session of conversations, and we had a little survey, I think, that we ran, and you consolidated all of that. And we're like, all right, here are the findings. You guys are all on different pages. Not a bad thing, but let's just understand where we're at and what culture means different things to different people. So we needed to sort of baseline. And then we did, as we mentioned, you guys came down, talked about the research, talked about the value of what culture does for business results and for an organization. There were lots of learnings from that. So that was an important educational step, I think, and those actions or the things that influence culture the most. And everybody's watching the leadership team. It starts from the top. So it's gotta, they've got to be role modeling the culture that you want, because that really sets the tone. So I think that was an important learning for all of us. And, we then did the workshop, as we talked about, and said, all right, everybody break up into groups. You're going to sketch some things out. You're going to do a playback. We're going to talk about and gather your feedback on what are the most important values that we need as a leadership team and for our teams. So we had a little fun with that. And I think we did 2 sessions like that, because we needed to break it up a little bit. The cool part, by the way, was coming out of the first session, one of our leaders was like, can we have Marshall come to, I'm doing a town hall for my leadership team in Atlanta. Can he come and talk about culture? So it sort of picked up speed, and people were excited about it. And we're like, yes. And that's one of our groups that, there's lots of change going on. So it's a great opportunity to bring that next level of leaders along with this culture work. And there was so much engagement in that conversation. So that was fantastic. And we established a culture steer co. So our exco was, our main group, but we said we even need a little subset. Let's choose 3 or 4 people that can help us be a little bit nimble as we have decisions that we need to make, so that we don't have to bring the whole exco along all the time, and we can do a playback if needed. So we established that group, and then we moved to phase 2. We announced that we're doing this work, and here's why, as I alluded to earlier. Our culture is not bad, but it can be better, and we want you all to be a part of it. So we're going to invite you, Access organization team members, to join a series of conversations if you want to. We're going to invite, randomly different groups of people that are, similar in nature, or whatever it is, level, region. And if you weren't invited and you're interested, please send us a note and we will add you to one of our conversations. And we basically presented the draft values that we came up with, had them react. What's your reaction to this? What are some of the behaviors, attributes? What does this mean to you? And got some feedback. And we took all of that and said, we learned some interesting things from talking to the people. And it reshaped a couple of things. It didn't dramatically change the path we were down, but we changed some definitions. We changed some of the behaviors that we have to be thinking about. We're like, this is how people are feeling. So it was really rewarding to go through that process, I have to say. So bring it all back, meet with the steer co. It was so cool to meet with the steer co and have us just make decisions on let's change this, let's adjust this. Let's also think about, our people engagement survey. What are the questions that we want to ask that sort of aligns to this? And we were like, we're stronger together. That's one of our values. Like and we were purposeful. We moved with pace. Like, this was great that we made some decisions together, and then we presented it back to the exco, and it was really well received. So, and now we're moving.
Before you go ahead, because I think one of the interesting things about that steerco was, I don't think, and you tell me if I'm wrong, I don't think we only picked people who were super in love with this project, right? Didn't we pick, like, it seemed like we had a mix of folks who might be a little bit, I don't know, cantankerous is the right word, but more challenging of some of the ideas. Like, how did you choose who was going to be on the steerco?
Some people raised their hand and said, hey, if you need somebody, I'd love to be on that. And then we were also trying to be balanced, where we knew we had a lot of change that we were working through. So we wanted a combination of some newer exco members or new to Access, and some legacy, and also thinking about the fact that we're global. We did want somebody to represent from London. So we sort of, we sort of handpicked a little bit, where we had we had a cross section, so to speak. So it was deliberate in our choices. And then we threw somebody on that's not officially on our exco, but who is passionate about culture and has lots of views, and has been at Access for a long time, and sort of wears a London hat, a US hat. So we added him as well.
Awesome. So, and I'll let you get back into phase 3, but I'm seeing a question came up that said, give me a sense of the timeline as you talk about this as well, and then I'll let you go into phase 3 as well.
It was a long process. I mean, we did start this. Oh gosh, when did we? We started our initial conversation last year, but when did we really kick this work off? You know what?
I think it was January last year. Yeah. So it was like at the beginning of this year, right?
Beginning of this year, but our first exco workshop was May.
May, yes, correct.
Yes. Yeah. So, all right. So that's not that long, but you should give yourself probably a good year, 12 months for all the phases. So when you're sort of introducing it and you're doing some of the work, and then you gotta allow for some flex there to have conversations, etc. And you may have to go back and revisit or revise. So you just want to give yourself I think 12 months.
Yeah,
and then we'll continue on.
Yeah, and we had originally proposed sort of 3 months for phase 1, but we also adapted based on the changes of the business and where they were, right? So, I think that's been, while it's been a critical part of it, we also have been sort of adaptable to the changes or the business needs that the exco
Yeah.
had. And so, like you said, we thought we could get everything done in one session, but because they needed a little bit more work and some of these concepts were new, we put a second session in place with the exco, et cetera. So I think
Yep.
I would say that, that first phase, took about, 6 to 9 months, as Lisa was saying. And then, could we have done it faster? Possibly, but we adapted. And then, now basically the plan is now to launch at basically 1 year from when we started, right? So talk a little
Yeah.
bit about phase 3.
Yeah. So our plan is in the very beginning of 25 to officially launch to the organization. All right, here's based on your input and all the work that we've been doing over the course of the year. Here are our new values, and we've got the behaviors that are associated with it. We're going to do training and, a variety of training, one, for leaders, for all employees. What does it look like? How does it show up? What are examples of it? We need to bring it to life. And this culture work has to be integrated in everything that we do. And so these behaviors, we want to make sure that it's reinforced in all of our various processes. So incorporating it into our performance management process, asking, related questions in our engagement survey. When we have job descriptions, we want to frame job descriptions that market. This is what Access is looking for, somebody who can align to these value sets, and that you'll be most successful if you align to this kind of thing. And if this is not you, then maybe you need not apply, kind of thing. But we want to really integrate it in everything that we do, and so we keep it alive, and it's like a thread throughout everything.
Yeah.
So we're gonna.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I love that everyone now has this, you talked about the North Star at the beginning around the business. You now have an agreement around this North Star of what the culture is going to be. And you can see on your list here, incorporated into performance management, people engagement. So the way that you're asking about the culture has changed now because you have a clear vision of what the culture is supposed to be that's agreed on by the exco, right?
Yep. And we're going to do some marketing and campaigning around it. Hopefully we'll get some, I don't know, mugs and, things that just bring it to life a little bit too. But, we're going to keep talking about it. Vince asks me about it all the time. And so he's really excited about it and launching it. And so, but it is important that we illustrate for people like what it means, what it looks like, how you show up, how we're, get them used to it over the course of 25. And you're going to be measured against this because we care about this stuff. And so if you're not exemplifying these types of behaviors, then that's going to be reflected ultimately in your performance outcome. So just,
and our recommendation was to sort of, delay the performance management piece of it, but to tell me if it's okay. But I understood that Vince was really adamant that we need to start putting this into our performance management processes quickly, right?
Yeah.
So talk to me about that conversation, because that's music to my ears. I don't want just values up on the wall. I want them to walk down the hall. I want people to get promoted if they demonstrate those values. So talk to me about that conversation a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, he was like, all right, how soon can we get this out there? How can we start holding people accountable to them? And I think just as he was learning through this process as we were too, and we completely agree with you, Vince. But I think we have to first show people, give them tools, let them understand what it means,
Right.
so that we're being fair, because we want to be fair and we want people to be excited about them and feel engaged and understand the why versus it being shoved down their throat and okay, now you're being measured against it. Let's give it time to breathe a little bit in the organization and find the right cadence. And he was completely yeah, that makes sense. Got it.
Yeah.
So
right, because he and the exco have been at this for a year right now, right? But for the rest of the organization, they've heard it through some of the listening that you've done, but it is new and it's new expectations. So I have a couple questions. I'm going to try to hit them really quickly for you. So one of them was, did you experience the risk of disrupting any effective current practices when implementing culture change efforts? And if so, how do you balance the need for transformation while preserving what already works? So did this put anything at risk that people were like, oh, we don't want to change that? And how did you handle that?
Yeah, I mean, but we were open about that and said, look, not everything needs to be thrown out the window. We want to keep the things that we really value and that work for us. And how do we integrate them into our new launch or the new value set that we want. Like, let's keep the stuff that works for us and let's change the things that we think will elevate us. We didn't want to completely start anew because we had a really good basis, but but we could have been better. And so let's adjust what can be better. So we were really open about that and authentic about it and said, well, what do you think? What do you think works well? What don't you think works well? And there were lots of different views on it. And we tried to come up with the common denominator, or if we were changing something, here's why.
Right. Just explain why. That's helpful.
Yeah.
Terrific. And then another question. I don't know if you'll have the specifics. This may be a follow-up for Blythe with Nicole on the line, but it says, would love to hear the specifics of the engagement question examples and performance management questions. So do you have anything in mind, Lisa, off the top of your head that you remember that was new that you put in?
Yes. So, well, just on the performance management question, we haven't incorporated it yet because we're just launching all the new values. So that's going to come in our sort of end of phase 3 at the tail end of this year. But we're already thinking about where it's going to get incorporated. And we have sort of business skills, and then we have like the leadership behaviors. We call them critical skills. That's where we're going to incorporate these new values and behaviors, and bring it to life within that. So that's how we're going to incorporate for performance. The engagement survey questions, we were working through modernizing our engagement survey and said we want it to be shorter, more nimble, easier to work with, where we can get insights. And we selected questions that align to each of our values. We said, all right, if we value people, what are a couple of questions that we want to ask that are related to people and some of the behaviors that we've sketched out? What's a question that aligns nicely to that? Because again, we want people feeling aligned to, our heart and soul that we're describing here. And we used our 4 values to select our questions that also reflected like where we've got to be effective and successful as a company too. So we've got to have we've got to make sure that we're performing as an organization, but we want to ask these types of questions from an engagement perspective. And our very first question was, I understand what is expected of me. And that was really important for us because it's like, you need clarity of expectations, right? That's sort of kind of the baseline for us is, do you know what you're expected to do? And then we can ask all these other questions. And then are you delivering on what you're expected to do? But first you have to have clarity. And are we being clear as an organization? Or is your manager being clear? So that was our sort of starting point.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm just a couple more questions. They were asking about, are there behaviors underlying the values? And I would say right now, those are in the process of being finalized, everyone. So that's kind of the work that we're involved with Access right now. And Lisa's actually fine tuning them. And she's doing a kind of a piece of work right now to brand them a little bit more Access oriented. So, when you think about your company, you think about, what's the language we use in our company? You can even see the word there. It says Access Pace. Pace is a word that you'll hear a lot at Access. So making sure that these behaviors don't feel generic, but they feel very Access. So she's very, been adamant to focus on that. And then the other piece there is, I would say that one of the interesting challenges we had with the executive team, and Lisa, jump in or correct me if I'm wrong, but when we asked them what kind of culture they want, they would give these sort of high level generic answers like, oh, we want a high performance culture. And then we would say, so what does that mean? And then we get 10 different answers from 10 different people. And so that was the process that we took them through during these ExCo meetings, where we literally went from okay, we want high performance. What's high performance look like? What do we value? What are the behaviors underneath those? And so we actually worked with them. And that was just a process of, obviously it helped us with the work we were doing with Lisa, but it also helped them start to understand what their expectations are. So now when they see in performance management a specific behavior that's being evaluated, that comes from the conversations we had. So I don't know if you wanted to add anything there, Lisa.
No, I think that's spot on. There's nothing really to add there.
Fantastic. All right. So
Marshall, 2 other questions that have come up in the chat that I'd like to get to, and then I know we want to talk about outcomes and how they're measuring, how they plan to measure success. Mary Ann asked, you've listed here in phase 3, incorporating into PM and in your engagement survey, but what about incorporating into TA, specifically behaviors into the job descriptions, maybe into interview guides? Will that be part of this as well?
That's a great point. And Blythe, just before this meeting, Blythe showed me, here are a list of all the things that we need to incorporate our new values into, or behaviors. Like, again, it has to string through everything. So, job descriptions, absolutely. I think I was mentioning before that we want to make sure that we're marketing ourselves that aligns to, here's who we are as an organization. Does this align to your value set? That, so we'll include it in there. Interview questions, yeah, perhaps. That's something that's probably on Blythe's list, but we've got a whole list of, yep, I just got the thumbs up. So these are things that we're going to incorporate in everything that we do so that we can be consistent. And again, it's part of our fabric, so to speak. The one other thing I just want to mention quickly is it's important that you're authentic, and we felt strongly about this. We just had a little brainstorm session yesterday as we were going through, Marshall, the list of behaviors. We want them to reflect an authentic, like, let's be real too. This is what we care about. We care about people who want to work hard. Like, that matters. Like, I shouldn't say care about. We value that, and it's hard work right now. And so we're like, let's put that in there because that's who we are and that's what we need. And so let's not pretend that's not the case. So I think it's important to be authentic and reflect what really does matter. Don't just put what you think looks good on a page and then be disappointed if people are not living up to other expectations. Like, be true to it. That would be my one bit of advice.
Well, one of the ways you can be true to it and be authentic is your third bullet here, to reward those who live the values through the behaviors every day. And I didn't want to miss the question Renew had asked earlier. If you could just go a little bit more into that. What are some of the plans for specific rewards that you have lined up?
Well, we are, again, through performance management and then how people are, scored or rated on that. So, and that, is looked at as part of our compensation and reward process. But I think it's when it comes down to dealing with things that you don't want to tolerate, giving feedback or addressing situations that people aren't living the values and showing up the way we're expecting, and who you promote, who you elevate, who you move around and give new opportunities to, all of those things. And it's something that we have to remind ourselves in the exco, often too. Like, that sets a cultural, by doing this, that's going to set a tone from culture. Are you sure you want to go down that path? So just something to be aware of, because everybody's watching. So I'd say that's kind of how we're thinking about it initially.
Wonderful. All right. So I think we covered all the questions, but keep them coming. And one last topic I want to talk about, and I was just having, again, out in my the CHRO summit we did out in Silicon Valley yesterday. We started to talk about culture scorecards, how organizations are measuring scorecards, and also how the board is asking about culture. And I know that you and Vince have had conversations with the board of directors about this initiative. They've been interested, you've been sharing information. And as part of that, you decided to put together and follow. This is, a lot of the work that you've done is based on the I4CP research to create a culture scorecard. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about what you've got in the works and how you plan on leveraging?
Yep. So you see this is an illustration of what we've gathered so far. It's a work in progress. It's still in draft form. We'll probably make a few tweaks to it, but we wanted a way, and the way we framed it to the board is we want to see how we're doing over time. Like, let's get a baseline, and then let's continue to check ourselves and measure ourselves as it relates to culture. And let's see how it goes. And if we have to refine, we will. But we certainly want to make sure, and I think, Marshall, you were like, you got to make sure you have something about business performance too. Like, you want to make sure that your financial performance is in line with all these things that you're doing culturally. So including, some of the financial measures, but also our engagement scores. How are we doing on attrition or like voluntary attrition? What's Glassdoor saying about us? How are you doing on diversity? We'll pull a question out of our engagement survey. So there's a few things that we want to sort of just continue to look at. Like, is there a correlation between how things are moving? Are we moving upwards? So we're going to see how it goes. And again, we'll adjust it. And one of our board members was like, yeah, and you'll probably refine this as you go along. They asked, who's going to see this? And we think it's going to be the exco and the board only to start, because we want to kind of just watch and see a little bit, watch and learn. So this is more for us to sort of keep track. One of the things I loved is, and before we kicked off our May meeting, when we really launched this. It was either our February meeting with the board or May. One of our directors said, after a risk conversation, he's like, one of your biggest risks that you haven't talked about is culture and people. And you've got to have, like, you've got to make sure you're thinking about your culture of your organization and that you've got the right people. And that was like buzzword for me. I was super excited because I'm like, couldn't agree with you more. And that was that also, I think, helped gives a lot of momentum behind the work that we're doing.
Yeah, and yeah, so what we've been seeing, for those who haven't, followed research, but I'll just be repeating it again and again, is that more and more boards are asking questions like that.
Yep.
And I think what I love what you did too is you didn't see it as a threat, you actually saw it as an opportunity, and you said, all right, so you want to hear about, let me talk to you about how we want to measure culture health, and you're sharing that with them, and then they're understanding that they're going to learn with you, and you're going to experiment, you may change, and then you're also, like you said, tying it to the business results. So for everyone so everyone understands, we've got a great case study from Microsoft on this, but the key things that Lisa and her team are doing here is they're taking some HR and business performance data that's aligned to their strategy, and then they're grouping those into what we call these indexes. So there's 3 indexes they've chosen. There's a ENPS and reputation index, which is basically going to tell them, how well are we, how well can we recruit people and how well can we keep people, right? Which is a critical part of their business strategy. Then you've got the performance and productivity index, like, are our people performing at a high level? Are they productive? And that's going to be that score. And then the inclusion and purpose index, which again, our research shows that having a purpose, having trust, having people being able to be themselves and share their ideas is a critical part of business results as well. So creating those, choosing a few metrics underneath each of those they're going to measure on a quarterly basis, and then that'll show up in the overall culture health. And so you could imagine, as you said, as they look over time, maybe the ENPS is at a green score at the beginning, but it drops next quarter. Then they can have a conversation with the board of why the ENPS might have dropped or why that inclusion index might have dropped, et cetera. And then get the leadership team to start actually making decisions and taking actions to fix them. So that's the final step is, just like a financial report, if, you saw some of your capital metrics drop or risk metrics change as part of your financial review, your leadership team would take action. Same thing, we want to start them to get in the habit here. Hey, we saw our culture index score drop. What action are we going to take to fix our reputation this quarter? What activities are we going to involve in? Is that fair to say, Lisa?
It absolutely is. Like, we want to know. And like, if we don't know, that could actually be more dangerous. So if we can see that something's trending in a direction that we're not happy, what do we need to do to like understand that better and address what's going on?
Yes. So, well, Lisa, I think we're just coming up on time. Any final thoughts or anything you wanted to cover before we I thank you for this great session and thank you for sharing with the group.
No, I think you brought this up at the very beginning when I did my capstone project and I talked about people strategy and this culture work. Somebody asked me, I think it was Kevin, actually, he was on the panel as the board, the mock board. He said, what of these initiatives are you most worried about being able to really deliver on? And I said culture, because it's nebulous and it's like, it's not a tangible thing. And how do you do this work? It seems big to me. It's so exciting to me, but that's what I'm afraid of, like how this will land on the executive team being able to action this. And it is big, but if you break it down into the component parts and you have great partners like we do with you and your team, Marshall, then you're bringing objectivity to the process. Also, it's not just HR saying we want to do culture, and it's bringing like important research that says here's why this is actually really important for your business success. So I think that brought credibility to the process too. So I would just wanted to, and not to plug and market the work that we do with you, but it really was valuable. We learned so much and we continue to learn so much. And so
awesome. Well,
I think having
it's been a fun
subject
project.
matter expertise.
Yeah, and been a fun project. Didn't mean to cut you off. I got a little bit delayed there, but thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for your partnership, and thank you, audience, for listening in as well. And as Lisa mentioned, so I'm Vice President of Advisory Service, so we work with members and non-members as well to help them along their culture journey. And I think what we do that's really unique is we bring a research-based approach to culture problems. And the other thing that we do too is we don't have to be doing all the work. As I mentioned, like we proposed to Lisa, hey, let's do the listening session. She said, you know what? I've got a team of folks. I want them to do that work. Can you just guide us? So we took a step back and we just helped them design those things. So we're not going to come in here with an army to change everything in your organization. Our goal is to teach you all how to fish so that you can build the capabilities in-house. And it's been a fun project with Lisa and Blythe and the rest of the Axis team. And thank you all for joining. Tom, over to you, and we can wrap things up.
Yeah, thank you, Marshall, and thank you, Lisa. You've gotten, you certainly spurred a lot of great questions from everyone in the chat today. So thanks for sharing all that you did from your journey. Appreciate it.
My
And just
pleasure.
as a final reminder for everyone on the call, Zeta has also put this over in the chat. All Next Practices weekly sessions are available for recertification credit hours with both HRCI and SHRM. So if you have a cert with either of those organizations, and I know it can be difficult to get the recert credit hours you need each year or whatever the period of time might be, just jot down the program ID or the activity ID that you need, and you'll be all set there. Once again, this is Next Practices Weekly, so we look forward to having you all back again each week, every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. As you saw earlier, we've got a great lineup of guests coming up for the next several weeks, so hope to see you back here again soon. Until then, have a great rest of your day and rest of your week. Bye now.